Hello, my friends. It's good to see you today. Today's a very special day for me. I have my longtime friend of almost 5 decades with him and his wife, Mary Louise Oates, Robert Shrum, Bob Shrum, who is a distinguished political genius over the last decades. I know you never see yourself as others see you, but just believe it. He was a journalist in the 60s when I first met him. He covered some of the first LGBTQ issues when no one else was covering them. Him and Mary Louise have been allies of our community, straight allies of our community for 5 decades. And that was early, trust me, folks. In fact, a lot of the meetings on Don't Ask, Don't Tell took place in their living room in Georgetown. He is probably through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then well into the last 2 decades, one of the leading political consultants in America, given the interest of time. Just to say, it was multiple presidential campaigns, Senate campaigns, governor campaigns. He has been in the forefront of making history these last decades. He is a writer, a very successful book. But most important is where I got to know Bobby real well. He has been a longtime friend of the Kennedy family. He is considered family. I think I'm not exaggerating when I said him and Senator Kennedy were very close, almost like brothers. And he currently is director of the Center for Political Future and whatever, and holds the Carmen and Lewis Warshaw Chair at University of Southern California. Not only does he teach, but he is known nationally for his seminars and podcasts and his commentary on politics. He is perhaps one of the 3 or 4 or 5 living legends in great political minds in this time. And I know it's difficult for him to hear that, but we all know it's the truth. Bobby, thank you for being with us today.
And glad to be here. What an intro that was.
Well, it was well earned and well deserved. And just so everyone is clear, no one else is allowed to call him Bobby except me. It is either Robert or Bob. But we are like brothers, so I get some leadway here. So don't even attempt it, because I'll come after you. Bobby, we've had an interesting week with the death of Queen Elizabeth II. I actually remember when her coronation, where we gathered in front of the Westinghouse store to watch it on television. You have many friends in fact, have been involved in campaigns in England. What's your take?
Well, obviously the monarchy, and especially Elizabeth II, had a very powerful hold on the imagination of the British people. I think the way she conducted herself over the years, with great dignity, with great devotion, and as King Charles said today, for a very long duration, left its mark on that country. I'm not sure the monarchy would have survived, at least in the form it is now, had she not made the contribution that she did. It is enthralling, I think, for an American to watch some of this pageantry. The proclamation of the king in St. James's Palace today, the surprising appearance of Prince William and the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, and their wives outside Windsor Castle to thank the crowds. I mean, I think that sent a chill through people. And, this will be now 10 days leading up to it's actually a little more than 10 days, leading up to the Queen's state funeral and internment. Will be a very powerful period, not only in Britain, not only in the Commonwealth, but I think around the world.
And as you talk to your friends, please let them know that the viewers of this blog and all of my friends and the gay and lesbian community of the United States are sending their love and great admiration for the Queen and the royal family. They have been very good to us. Now, I hate to get you down to tacky politics, but that's why you're here. And as sort of a godfather now and less of a technician, we'll have a couple interviews with you this election. Today, let's look at the Senate. how do you read the Senate going, and what do you think are the key races that we should be paying attention to?
Well, we could go race by race, but I think there are some overarching realities here that have changed the likely outcome from what it looked like 3 or 4 or 5 months ago to what it looks like today. One was the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which I think has energized women, suburban women, independent voters, and young people. And we are seeing an enormous rise in registrations among women. In a way, the GOP is like the dog that caught the car. They've been promising for years to somehow or other get Roe v. Wade overturned. It was a motivating issue for their hardcore base. But when it actually happened, a good 65, 70% of the country disagrees with what's happened here. That's number one. Number two, candidate quality matters. And when you look at some of the candidates that the Republican Party has nominated, you have to say that Democrats in those states have a much better chance. Herschel Walker in Georgia, Dr. Oz from New Jersey, who's running for the Senate in Pennsylvania, and who constantly engages in this kind of, he just keeps making mistakes. I mean, you watch him walk through a grocery store talking about the price of crudités, and then John Fetterman, his opponent, comes on and says, here, $5.29. Here's a veggie tray. That's what we call it in Pennsylvania. So candidate quality matters. And actually, the New Hampshire primary next week will be important too, because there is an election denying far-right Trump candidate who's been leading in the polls, and establishment Republicans are now trying to rally behind his opponent, because if he's the nominee, then Maggie Hassan, the senator from New Hampshire, the Democratic senator, has an even stronger chance of being reelected. So I think the basic and Senate races are not like congressional races. Congressional races can, most of the time, congressional races generally tend to just follow the national trend. But here we have two things going on. We have a national trend which has turned in favor of Democrats in the generic balloting, for example, for Congress. I mean, we'll have to see whether it turns out that way. And you have specific races where you have specific problems of candidate quality.
Let me ask you a question, Bobby, as a perhaps silent third reason. Joe Biden was like the musician in August pulling rabbits out of the hat all the time, and they just were nonstop. And his disapproval rating has dropped to just like 8-10%, the same level that Trump and Barack Obama was at. How important do you think those victories were in this race?
Well, let me say two things. I think, first of all, getting a lot done in August, getting some of this major legislation through, getting the Inflation Reduction Act, getting the burn pits law for vets who suffered terribly because of these burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, and before that in other conflicts. Getting all of that through, getting the new law on chip making here in the United States passed, all of that sent a very powerful message to people that we're actually doing, that he's actually doing something. We're actually getting things done in Washington. And that helps. And so, by the way, does the decline in gas prices. And so does what may appear to be the muting of inflation. We've got to wait and see what next week's report brings. But inflation appears to be modulated from where it was 6-7 months ago. But at the same time, David, even before the president's numbers started recovering, Democrats started doing better and better and better in the generic congressional ballot and in some of these polls on Senate races. And I think that is because we also live in an era of negative partisanship, where people are not voting necessarily for someone, they're voting against someone. And the other factor in all of this is Donald Trump. I mean, people say, well, gee, sometimes he crowds Biden off the front pages. Well, is that good or bad for Republicans? I think it's bad for Republicans. What's happened at Mar-a-Lago, his constant election denial. I think Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, who, whatever you think of him, is a very smart guy, although he did get outfoxed by Chuck Schumer on the Inflation Reduction Act. He's a very smart guy. He's got to be tearing his hair out. He would like the election to be a kind of referendum on Biden, although I think now it might work out better for Democrats than it would have before. Instead, Trump constantly makes it a referendum on him and whether he won the election, whether it was stolen in 2020. I think voters have very little interest in that.
When you talk about the dog who chased the car, it's not only, I think the two big issues are Trump and abortion. But I look at Florida, where Val Deming is now within 2 or 3 points of Marco Rubio, which is virtually tied. And it's like he keeps the gift that keeps giving. He attacked the gay community and the Don't Say Gay bill, come out against the Marriage Equality, Respect for Marriage Act, and it's likely to have a vote in the Senate. And each one of those statements in itself probably isn't devastating, but he keeps making them about vets or whatever. It builds he's building the Democratic coalition.
Well, he is the unwitting unifier and vote motivator of the Democratic Party. And I think that when he stands at center stage, and he can't stand to be anywhere but at center stage, I think that helps Democrats. Look, he has his hardcore. He's going to, if he runs for the nomination and he's reasonably healthy, I don't think he's a perfect specimen, as he said the other day. But if he's reasonably healthy, he's probably going to get the Republican nomination. That also drives a lot of Republican strategists that I know to distraction, because they think that he's about the weakest person they could nominate in 2024. So, there was an interesting discussion. I thought it was absurd, actually, on CNN yesterday, where Jake Tapper said maybe Biden should invite Trump to go with him to the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Well, there are several problems with that, aside from the fact that it's kind of a nutty idea. First, the royal family and the British government invite people to the state funeral. President Biden is obviously invited, and they're happy to have him. Secondly, given his insatiable desire to be center stage, he might stand up and walk in front of the coffin as it was being taken out of Westminster Abbey. But that's what he's doing politically here. He's standing in the spotlight constantly, and it is a profound motivator for Democrats and for independent voters, by the way, where people who are not affiliated with either party, where he's not in good shape at all. And he's driving those voters, I think, toward Democrats.
I'm going to put a couple of groups together and see how you feel, and then in the end, we'll get your prediction for the Senate. We won't hold it to you. You can change it in early October when you're back on. The Democratic incumbents, Kelly, Nevada, New Hampshire, Georgia. How do you think we're holding in all of those places?
I think all of those races, I think Kelly will win. I think in Nevada, it's a little tougher, but I think Catherine Cortez Masto will win. In Georgia, I have to believe that at the end of the day, Raphael Warnock will win. By the way, that's a race that could again go to a runoff, because under Georgia law, you got to get 50% of the vote. And if it's very close and it's 49-49, then we'll have another 5 or 6 week campaign after November that may again determine control of the Senate, depending on what happens elsewhere. Maggie Hassan, I think, will probably hold on in New Hampshire. if I had to predict the Senate overall, I think it will be somewhere between 51 and 53 Democrats.
Let me ask you about a couple of long shots. I would put in that category Ryan, Beasley in North Carolina, and Val Deming. Do you see any of them breaking through?
Well, let's do these one by one. If they do, by the way, then 53 is a very modest and careful prediction. Val Demings, I think, could win in Florida if she raises the money. I have to say that with a caveat that Florida always breaks Democrats' hearts. I mean, you know, going back to 2000 and coming forward since then. And, you know, it's just the structure of the race helps the Republicans in Florida. Tim Ryan would win in Ohio, I think, if the Democratic ticket was as a whole stronger than it is. But there's a potential there for a kind of red wave that, even though he might win on his own, could swamp him. On the other hand, the Democratic nominee for governor, Nan Whaley, is doing far better than people expected. I mean, she's not ahead, but she's doing far better than people expected. And if you don't have that red wave, I think there's a very good chance that Tim Ryan could prevail. That's another case of candidate quality, by the way. J.D. Vance, who people, you know, he was the coming thing 3 or 4 years ago, hillbilly elegy, all that stuff that he, you know, was talking about. Now he's just become a kind of Trump mini-me. And I don't think he's running a very good campaign. So I think it could happen there. What's the other state you mentioned?
North Carolina.
North Carolina is always close. I think Cal Cunningham would have won if it had not been for the sex scandal that engulfed him at the end of the 2020 race. And North Carolina is a place that's changed so much. It's like Georgia. I mean, so many people have moved in. You have Raleigh and Durham and Charlotte, these places where you have a lot of new voters or new voters who are new to the state. So she has a chance. But if 1 or 2 of those people win, then Democrats will have a very good night in the Senate.
Recently, Republicans, like in South Carolina and all across the country, are wiping abortion off their websites. They're trying to pretend that they've never really pushed for this because it's clearly devastating their politics, even in the South.
David, where do you think most voters get their information? Do they go to candidate websites?
No.
No, they get their information from the news to some extent and from campaign advertising. I mean, and let me tell you something. Democrats running for the Senate in these states are not going to let people wipe away their records. They've got them on tape. They've got their what used to be on their websites. You know, this is a classic case of where you can run, but you can't hide from your record on abortion.
Yeah. Final question, Bob, and I'll go first. Every election, there is a Senate race that absolutely stuns us, that no one expects to happen. For me, I believe Grassley will lose in Iowa. What race do you think holds that potential of an upset that night? They got Bennett and Colorado, or?
I hope you're right about Grassley. He shouldn't be running for the Senate. He's 85 years old. But the problem is that Iowa, which, you know, voted for Al Gore, I mean, you know, and almost voted for John Kerry and did vote for Barack Obama, has in recent years become redder and redder and redder. So that's the problem that the Democrats face in Iowa. So I hope you're right. If I was going to worry about a race that everybody assumed was safe for Democrats, it would be Michael Bennett in Colorado. He's a terrific senator. He's soft-spoken. He's a very thoughtful person, but he's running against a Republican who's sort of out of the old mold of Republicans. You know, this is, you know, we wouldn't agree with him on most of the issues. He, he's wants to cut taxes for people at the top, all of those issues. But he's not an election denier. He doesn't think the last election was stolen. And he's running a reasonably good campaign.
And he's pro-choice,
Yeah.
And he, having lived in Colorado, he's the kind of candidate the Coloradans love, a sort of centrist, cowboy type. Though I think Colorado has increasingly become a Democratic state, but I agree with you, Bob. I'm very grateful. All of us are very grateful for your wisdom over the years and your work that you've done over the years. And I want to let our readers know that you will be visiting with us again a couple times before the election, including probably early October and just before the election. Please subscribe down below. Please share this with your friends. It helps me enormously. Bobby, I am so grateful. Have a good weekend.
Okay, and sorry for that phone ringing in the background.
Don't worry about it. This is a down-home blog.
Okay. Thanks, David. Talk to you later. Okay, bye.